My name is Melissa Mungai. I serve as the managing editor. And this webinar is also to remind all of you, some who have come for the first time and some of you who know us, that we, Jumuiya East African Community Law Journal, we are a peer-reviewed periodical of Kabarak University School of Law. And our aim is to offer scholars and practitioners of EAC law a platform to produce and disseminate their research. We also run a blog known as Usuli, and we welcome contributions anytime on any subject pertinent to East African community. You can also find us on X, formerly Twitter, under the handle Kabu at Kabu Press Kenya. We'll put that in the chat. And of course, we welcome your views from the beginning of the discussion and throughout to chime in. So Q&A is open for you, the chat function for your comments and your concerns and whatever kind of things you want to share with us. I'll hand over now to my co-moderator to introduce himself as well as to introduce our panelists, and we set up this discussion. Karibuni once more.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Melissa, for starting us off. My name is John Ambani, Associate Professor of Public Law and Dean at Kabarak Law School. But today I'm here in my very, very exciting capacity as co-editor-in-chief of the Jumuiya, which is our East African Community Law Journal. It will be good if my colleagues also on the editorial board, who are also panelists today, can introduce themselves. I don't know where to start. Maybe Dr. Mbori, you want to start?
Thank you, Prof. My name is Harrison Mbori, and I am co-editor-in-chief together with Professor Ambani of Jumuiya, which is the journal and a platform that is hosting us today. And I'm also an university school and a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Luxembourg. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I look forward to the very great and engaging discussion we are going to have in the next 2 hours or so. Thank you so much.
Emily, you want to tell us who you are?
Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Emily Osiemo. I'm an editor with Jumuiya East Africa Law Journal. I'm equally an advocate practicing with the firm of Lumumba and Ayeko Advocates. We look forward to fruitful discussions on the current issues affecting the East African community. Welcome, everyone.
Great. Sambu?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Chepkorir Sambu. I am also an editor at Jumuiya and a tutorial fellow at Kabarak University. And I also research conflicts and peace in the Horn of Africa.
Karibu sana. And now the one and only left, Jentrix.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to be here. My name is Jentrix Wanyama. I'm an associate editor at Jumuiya and also a technology, media, and telecommunications lawyer at the firm of Kitness and Osiemo Associates. Really, really excited to be here.
Oh, great, great. Melissa, you proceed to the real issues or introduce yourself and we come back to...
I think I can just reiterate, Melissa Mungai, managing editor at Jumuiya, and I think we just get into the issues.
Real stuff. Yeah, the real stuff actually very tough, looking at the context. And actually the context gives us a very good room for content, though not always funny at this point in time. As Melissa's mentioned earlier, we are taking care of East African community law. And as a journal, one would expect that we'll be doing a lot of the written, the publishing, the editing, and all that. But we also have a tradition of reaching out and engaging with issues as they emerge. And this year, this is going to be our first one, where we do a real dive into the issues affecting us as a community. And coming at this point, a lot has really happened. A lot. Actually, a stranger from space would wonder whether these brothers and sisters are safe at all. We've had many things many salvos thrown left, right, and center. One of them we could talk about has been the Kenyans in Tanzania, and actually also Ugandans in Tanzania recently, trying to find their way in a courtroom where the opposition leader in Tanzania, Tundu Lissu, is being tried. And very interesting things happened there. I think it was all over the media. Activists from Kenya, led by former Chief Justice William Tunga, very respected, academic, lawyer, human rights defender, and for us in Kabarak, a colleague in the school board. And one would have expected, for example, that a Chief Justice has diplomatic protection, at least. And you saw him getting stuck there at the airport. Other activists from Kenya, like Boniface Mwangi, claiming that he's been tortured, actually. We've seen foreign governments coming back to talk to the issue, the US especially. Another very important figure in Kenya, Martha Karua, senior counsel, former member of parliament, minister in Kenya, several governments in Kenya, I think. That's a very, very high, ranking official also to be stopped just like that. And then, of course, we have the issue of Agatha from Uganda. And then that could be a lot already to even start with. And then constant bickering, constant diplomatic goofs, I don't know how to call them. We've had, for example, the chief of staff in Uganda tweeting whatever he tweets, sometimes targeting Sudan, sometimes targeting Kenya, sometimes targeting the opposition in Uganda itself. We've also had Kenyan presidents speaking in very, very serious forum, what I would call a public political forum, and throwing salvos at Tanzania or Uganda or the smaller countries in the region, Burundi, Rwanda, and saying how small they are economies. We've also had President Suluhu also doing similar things against Kenya, and it's quite exciting in an academic sense, but actually to debate, but actually very difficult issues when it comes to the real effect or impact it could have on the community and the people, the real flesh and bones that we have, the community people. I don't know what you think about it, and I really would like to start there so that all of us can just take one go at this. You see this as just normal brothers and sisters fighting for space in the house, or do you see this as signs of a house just about to get into fire? We can start anyway, but I think Jentrix, we can go fast, and then Sambu, and from there let it take a natural course.
Thank you, Prof. It's been really interesting following some of the developments that have been taking place across the region. I think it's quite telling the point at which this is happening. I mean, the community just marked 25 years last year. And we've made it further, much further than the original or the first community ever did, of course. And I don't think we can then call these teething problems. These are real issues affecting the community. And I think moving forward, when we're thinking about, okay, what are the next 25 years going to look like for the community, if at all, then there needs to be a discussion around how the countries, the different member states will come together and sort of shake off some of the tensions that are there. And of course, that means serious change in some of the diplomatic approaches that we've been seeing, as well as the collaborative approaches that we have been seeing. To mention briefly about the recent abductions that happened in Tanzania. I know we will get a bit deeper into it within the discussion. Again, quite interesting that right now it is Tanzania on the spot, but these are trends that we have seen across the community and in different member states having different levels of approaches when it comes to using security forces to deal with what can be called maybe civic or political approaches by citizens and other residents within the community. Yeah, so just to wrap it all up, I know we'll talk about it a bit more. I think it is quite interesting that this is happening at the 25th year mark, and it is important that we take stock and decide what really is going to be the future of our Jumuiya. Thank you.
I like the fact that you say these are not tipping problems anymore. We are 25. Typical Kenyan case 25, you actually normally for, let's say, middle class families, you're actually past university now. You should be figuring out your professional journey, and yet we're still having basic problems. I think I like that summary. And I'd like to hear from Sambu. How do you take this?
Yeah, thank you. I support what Jentrix has said. The recent developments in the community have actually made me think a bit more about what the EAC has achieved in the last 25 years. And in as much as we have managed to come up with amazing normative frameworks, institutional frameworks, we've implemented the EAC passport to a good extent, but to what extent really has this translated into ensuring the community integrates honestly on the ground? To what extent have we made the community people-centered? To what extent, do we actually feel part of the community 25 years down the line, or is it just a formal community of integration? And we've always known we're in the East African community. If it dies, another one will resurrect, etc. So these developments have made me think about what exactly do we consider ourselves to have actually integrated people to people 25 years down the line? And I'm also worried about, I know Jentrix we'll talk about this more, but I'm also worried about the trend of the setbacks we are having in democracy. And this is a challenge that's facing Africa generally, but is now very much manifested in the community.
Interesting. You mentioned the fact that you feel that perhaps we haven't gelled well as a people of the community. What would be the sign that we have gelled? Isn't it nice when fight for space? I don't know. I don't know. In African situation, for example, brothers and sisters growing up, they fight a bit. For small things and the big ones sometimes. I don't know whether that means they are not part of the family or it just means that they actually are trying to belong. Do you want to say something to build on that issue?
Yes, I would, and I know it will be picked up by the rest later, but even in terms of freedom of movement, it's there, but how much have we really integrated in regards to freedom of movement in within the community? It's still an elite process. It's still an elite institution, an elite process. And so that means people or citizens of Jumuiya do not really even comprehend what the community does, aside from the occasional news and headlines that are made when things become extreme. So that's my point.
Okay. I would like to hear from Dr. Mbori on this as well, because if I was to follow up on it, I see that Martha Karua has linkage with BCJ, and you can see that she's willing to fight for the brother. Kenyans are in Tanzania, and it's very clear that Tundu Lissu, the opposition leader, have been having links with Kenyan politicians, have been having links with Kenyan activists. Isn't that what a community is? So what do you want to see to say now we are actually getting that?
Yes, thanks, Prof. And it's true what you have said and what I think my colleagues have mentioned. I think we have to see ourselves, as you have said, as part of a singular community. In fact, the theoretical framework that we should be thinking about here is thinking about the EAC as a constitution, or what we would call the constitutionalization of the East African community. And maybe this is going too far thinking about it. But if you look at it from the lens of how the East African Court of Justice has been developing its jurisprudence, there is an opportunity to think about the EAC as such. So one of the first cases that came to the community that related to questions of human rights was this case from Uganda called James Katabazi and 21 others versus the Attorney General of Uganda. And when you read that case, you will be shocked at how similar some of the things that took place in that case have been taking place in the community as recent as last year and this year, because you have a scenario there where individuals are charged with, terrorism, possession of arms. They are released on bail by the court, and then immediately they are released, they are rearrested, and then they are charged in the military court for the same pattern of facts with the same things that they are done. And even after the Constitutional Court of Uganda finds this action to be unconstitutional, the detention is not withdrawn. This might sound very familiar. So we have actually a decision where the East African Court of Justice has held that idea of not following judicial decisions, that idea of high-handedness of the executive arm of government goes against the principle of the rule of law within the community, the principle of good governance under the treaty, which is found in Article 6D and 7.2 of the treaty. Then a few years after that, this is taking place very early on in 2007, I think maybe at around 2010, a very eminent scholar now who's currently a judge of the High Court of Kenya called Samuel Mukira Muhochi is then denied entry into Uganda while he was going with a group of ICJ missioners into Uganda, and he's not given very good reasons why he's not allowed to enter the country. He's quote unquote detained at the airport for a number of days, and then is put back on a KQ flight to come back to Kenya. It sounds familiar. This is happening now again, exactly in the same way we are seeing, Martha Karua, the CJ. It's exactly, it's exact the same pattern that we are seeing, and the court says that is against the treaty. Those actions are against the treaty. You have to be given, due consideration, due process. You have to be taken through a due process procedure to be told what are the specific reasons why you as a citizen of the community is not being allowed to enter into another country. Under the Common Market Protocol, I think Article 7, you cannot not be allowed to enter into any of these countries unless there is a good reason and substantive reason, either national security or possession of drugs or some very good reason. But in this case, no reasons have been given, and in the cases that we have been seeing recently, completely no reasons are being given. And even after someone has entered, then you enter into the space where someone is being arrested, and then they go through very credible claims of torture. This is what has happened to Boniface Mwangi and Agatha from Uganda. Very worrying trends that the court has already spoken about, that we in the community at some point thought we have moved past this hurdles, and then now we are finding ourselves going back there. Of course we're going to go back to the court, but you can see there are already decisions where the court has specifically stated that this goes against the community ethos. And that's why I was speaking about there's some sense in which we have to think about the community as a constitutional or constitutionalized entity, and then we will start we will not hear members of parliament in Kenya or in Tanzania speaking in the way we have heard them speak recently, very nationalistic aims and statements that seem to say this is our country, we will not allow foreigners to come in, and if you're in the community, you're not a foreigner. If you're a citizen of the community, you're definitely not a foreigner, per the standards we have created in the treaty, which I'm now referring to as the constitution of the community. So those are my sort of preliminary thoughts.
Very, 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 very interesting thoughts there. Emily, you want to chime in?
Thank you so much. If I can continue from where Dr. Mbori has stopped. Indeed, what is happening in the community is a worrying trend. There's so much that leadership in the community is elevating national standards and laws over the community laws. And this has come, especially the recent development of deportation of Kenyans from Tanzania. the government was saying that they cannot allow activists in their country. I mean, it's very unfortunate because once we have the East African Treaty, states cannot use their national laws over their community laws. And indeed, that is one of the principles that was highlighted in the case of Samuel Mukira Muhochi versus the Attorney General of Uganda, because Uganda was trying to say that Mukira Muhochi was prohibited immigrant into Uganda, and he couldn't be allowed because of their national law, their national immigration law. I had that being said by the members of parliament in Tanzania, saying that, you see, they have their own Tanzania Immigration Act, and therefore they can deport whoever they want. That's very unfortunate, because when states committed under the Common Market Protocol to open up borders without restrictions, we meant it. Citizens of East African community should be able to access borders, unless and otherwise under 3 grounds: public health, public security, or issues to do with I'll think about the other one. So unless and otherwise is under those grounds.
Emily, perhaps that's enough to justify what the Tanzania government did, the security one.
And even if that were the case, the Tanzanian government under the Common Market Protocol has an obligation to do notification, proper notification to the partner state in where they are limiting someone's right. They had an obligation to notify the Kenyan government. I highly doubt if such was done. And these persons who are being deported, they had a right to be told reasons, and none of them was advanced. So it's very unfortunate of what is happening in the community. And this community is people-centered. It's our community as people. We have to take charge of this community. We can't allow the elites to take us back. We have rule of law in the community, and we have to ensure that it's being complied with. Because if we allow the elites to take over, we will have this community collapse, just like the defunct one of 1977. So my last call is that the people of the community, we have to take charge of this community and ensure that the rule of law is being upheld and complied with. Thank you.
And I like the pronouns even uses our, you know, and just to put together what everyone is saying, there's a need to return to history and see that we're reading from the same script, just different players, which is always what happens when there's a moment of crisis in the family. You have to sit down and say, family meeting, okay, where did we come from? What is our consciousness? Which is sort of what Chepkorir was talking about, that feeling. When you asked what would be the manifestation of this feeling, the word that came to my mind was, it's a no-brainer. You know, I'm moving from, you know, one country to another within the community, and I'm welcome. You know how we talk about our values. So that consciousness, and I like that women played the Jumuiya anthem to kind of remind us of some of the values. That would be my answer to this. So if I could chime in, would be, what is our consciousness when we think of EAC in our day-to-day? How does it affect us in whatever that we do? If that's a point for reflection as we move forward, so that even when you tweet that comment, when you make that contribution to any sort of splits we're going through, where is that consciousness coming from? What is informing that kind of opinion? We used to do it very well in school, you know. You would be told loyalty pledge. I mean, primary schools and things like that, loyalty pledge. How I know in Kenya, there's a lot of that, of teaching children about the Jumuiya community. But has it been lost on us who are practitioners, who have moved away from that idea of being told you have to have one way of thinking? So I think it's just a return to that history and the consciousness, and to pass it on. Because it's interesting how Dr. Mbori was saying that it's cut and paste, you know, the Katabazi situation, Justice Muhochi situation, and then here we are today again. So
I see.
I think
It
the
seems
consciousness,
that we're actually very consistent
yes,
in the wrong things.
yeah,
There's no break. I think that's what I got from Dr. Mbori, and you notice I didn't speak after I finished because
he said it all.
and then Emily continues to cement the same position.
Yeah,
But as an academic, I never make an academic
Conclusion.
Moderator again, because they also just want to chime in.
True.
I just kept wondering.
What would be yours then?
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
actually very crazy because as an academic, I'm thinking perhaps we can't use one. We can't speak overally.
Mm.
I think the isolated cases also speak a different story. If I was to talk, for example, about even that instance in Tanzania, I know my friends,
Yeah.
Honorable Neto Yugi and Honorable former Chief Justice Maraga, actually got it.
Yeah.
Which means that there could have been a barometer being used to determine who gets in and who doesn't. But I think the barometer was much more about the extent of activism. So there was a danger they were fearing. And the danger here might have been the danger of how much activistic you are, if there's such a term. William Trunga, of course, represents activism to the extreme. So another Chief Justice who doesn't look maybe
As
as
activated.
active as that was allowed in. So I really don't know how to measure this.
But you're assuming some rationality. You're assuming that this decision has a rational standard. You're assuming
Exactly.
that there is some kind of, rule that has been developed somewhere in a boardroom that this is the standard we will use. I am very skeptical about that view. I would not think that way, because if we use that view, then how then did Boniface Mwangi get in? Because he was in the country, he had been allowed in. He wasn't stopped at the border post. How did Agatha get in? And if it's about a barometer of how activistic you are, then Boniface Mwangi is a bit he should have been stopped even from leaving Nairobi, leave alone entering through Dar. So I don't think that
my hypothesis is that they didn't see this coming.
It's arbitrary.
My hypothesis, they didn't see this coming. By the time they are putting their systems in place, Boniface and Agatha are already the other side, I think.
Yes, but also that maybe shows you that they were not. I don't know. They were not using a very strict rule about this is the standard of how activistic you are, and it's possible, like you said, also that they realized this after they were already in, and then they started scampering and coming to this decision. And this is exactly what we are saying does not conform to any rule of law standard. It doesn't conform to the rule of law standard.
It doesn't. At the same time, remember we've had in the past peace initiatives, for example, by Jakaya Kikwete, Kappa, they let Mkapa, they were able to negotiate peace this side, remember, 2007, for example. So it's a very difficult position to be in, say, sitting as an academic to say, can make a blanket. At the same time, I've been to Rwanda severally. I think Kenya and Rwanda are doing very well in terms of friendship. Kenya and Uganda are doing very well many times in terms of just being able to move to the other side and back. Difficulties in Tanzania sometimes, which tells you that perhaps we might need much more studies that are not very blanket overall, maybe looking at exceptions sometimes to the general rule, or a new rule for this situation and not the other. But that's just me putting on a different hat. I want to come back to my hat today as a moderator, because that's really what I am paid to do today. And this connects with what we already have here. I followed the interview by the Prime Secretary Musalia Mudavadi. I thought it was very disturbing. Because when I start to analyze what he's saying, it seems that it's actually in agreement with Tanzania authorities in what. So even as we talk about solidarity, perhaps there's a disconnect between the political actors and the normal people. To the political actors, perhaps there's a language that unites them sometimes. While we would have expected Kenya's Foreign Affairs Office to be really, really bitter and trying to kick and stone and spear to get their citizens out of this crisis, especially if torture is also implicated. You're actually finding the spokesperson for the government in this kind of affairs is actually saying Kenyans should learn to shut them up, which tells me that there could be bigger problem of democracy and human rights, not just in Kenya, but in the region as a whole. And if I was to add this to what we saw Martha Karua going through in Uganda, or Besigye himself, many times I've followed those developments, and you see, sitting as a judge, for example, you see one of the accused persons coming to court, and their health situation is dire. Nothing follows immediately that looks like the court is concerned about the health of this person. And the democratic space continues, the human rights space continues to be like, so just like you've said, consistent, nearly in the wrong things all the time. I don't know what you've got to say about this Jentrix. And I think it would be good to start there. The democratic conversation, the human rights conversation. Where are we at in the region? Do we even have a safe haven? Just go on. And you can have other things to follow.
Thank you, Professor. Very important conversation to be had, very timely as well. And I think when we are talking within the context of the community, when we are talking matters to do with human rights and democracy, it is important to connect the two. What does the state of human rights and democracy within the member states at a national level have to do with the goals and aims of the Jumuiya within the regional integration level, from a regional integration perspective? And so I think it is always important to remind ourselves of this, that the objective of the EAC, as enshrined in Article 4 of the treaty that establishes it, is to encourage and promote collaboration amongst the member states. And this collaboration, if you really read that article, is said to be at multiple levels and from multiple approaches. So the collaboration is meant to be economic, it's meant to be political, it's meant to be touching spheres even like technology, culture, and research. And so it really envisions this united bloc that really comes together and integrates at almost every sphere that affects the citizens in the different member states. And then the article goes ahead to say that in furtherance of this collaboration, which is meant to aid each member state, it's meant to be to the benefit of each member state, that the member states will actually proceed to go ahead and form several collaborations. And ultimately, what the treaty envisions is the formation of a political federation or confederation. I don't think it is possible to achieve that at a regional level if the different member states have not achieved a semblance of certain institutions, a semblance of a respect for democracy and human rights at a national level before we can even come and talk about it at a regional level. I think it will be really difficult to do so. Having said so, we have witnessed a number of disturbing trends across the board. It is not just, I know right now, of course, as we've said, right now, Tanzania is all over the news, but it is not just Tanzania. In every direction, whether you're looking north, south, east, or west, you can see it across the region. We're seeing a crackdown on human rights, of course, and we're seeing a reduction in the civic space. We're seeing that governments are tending more towards authoritarian tendencies, which has been really unfortunate. Human rights such as the freedom of expression and more recently, the freedom of the press is really under crisis right now. For example, we've seen, it's not in the news right now, but Burundi actually has a couple of journalists who are in exile right now. And just last year, one of them was released from a 2-year imprisonment through a state pardon. And this is just a journalist who dared to speak, unfavorably towards the regime. We've also seen a trend of sort of punishments or penalties being meted towards the press or different bodies, whenever they speak contrary to what the ruling regime is saying. We've seen it last year, for example, Tanzania, the body that governs the press, they gave out a 1 month shutdown to 3 of the newspapers there for publishing something that was seen to be against government. So for sure, we are seeing a shrinking in the civic space. It's quite alarming and quite sad to see this. At the same time, and almost to the opposite of this, we're seeing an increase in the youth participating in civic and political matters, and that has been really encouraging. Some people might call me part of the youth. It's been really encouraging to.
There's one more here.
It's been really encouraging to see. And what is interesting is that because of the use of the internet and the proliferation of the internet, it's even, working for the regional collaboration. Now we are seeing people helping each other online. Whenever there is some sort of protest, you see, please help us promote hashtag Kenya this or that, help us promote hashtag Uganda this or that. And so there is increased collaboration and communication between citizens from different member states. I think that has been really, really encouraging to see. It's just unfortunate that on the other side, we're seeing different governments cracking down on the opposite side. And I think I must round it off by also mentioning that there has been an increase in human rights violations. This cannot be overspoken about or overemphasized. Has been really sad to see from, in any direction you look at. We're seeing people being abducted, people being detained, and it has just been very unfortunate. I would like to round off this section by quoting, the author Nanjala Nyabola, who recently wrote about this very issue. I think she was published on Al Jazeera, and she said that when you look at the Jumuiya and what our progression has been when it comes to democracy and human rights, initially it was almost like, the move was towards elections. We really wanted to be able to have elections. We wanted to have multi-partyism. And eventually, most states were able to achieve this. But it is very dangerous to conflate elections from having democracy. Of course, we know this. And what do I mean by this, and why is this important? I think, to me, when I look at the Jumuiya, I would almost say that the next frontier for us in terms of democracy and human rights as a bloc and as the individual countries will be for the different citizens of the different member states to really go down to the grassroots and ensure that they are participating from the very beginning of the democratic process, because it really just isn't about elections anymore. It's really hitting down to our day-to-day activities as citizens. Thank you.
Wow. A lot to think about there. Yeah. And Jentrix, as you spoke, I think one of the things you said earlier was, how do you federate if you're having authoritarian tendencies? You have no software of human rights or democracy that then should, glue you together. There's no adhesive to connect you. And so you're wondering whether, for example, even this East African Federation is possible in this kind of arrangement. Yet, and I think I'm going to Osiemo, and I would like to hear this. Yet, in my scholarship, I've always thought that perhaps part of the solution to the colonial boundaries, containerization, even at smaller levels, say at districts or counties and all that, could be going bigger. We are fighting in a very small space. Let's break those barriers and try fighting at a bigger space that is much more original. We still have our people across board, Masai, Samia, and all that. on the borders. They'll just open up. But you've questioned that. I'll be keen to see how that comes out when Osiemo speaks. Then the other issue you say, which is actually on a good note, is that there's actually hope. And you single out yourself and Melissa. Gen Z, Gen Z might just be the solution. And working together with internet, for example, especially social media, and we saw that in Kenya, Gen Z are quite capable of talking with one another and mobilizing. In Kenya, I think they did it quite well. And perhaps this is where we can focus if we think about emancipating East Africa. Interesting, I think. But before even Madam Osiemo speaks, I would like to know, as this conversation goes on, whether the youth in East Africa are at the same level, part of education, because I think to federate at internet level, you need to be at the same level of education. But secondly, same access to internet, being able to buy the bundle, but also having the network in your environment. I don't know whether that could be the limitations of this. And so perhaps we need to think harder about connecting that. But anyway, let's have Madam Osiemo chime in this discussion.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that. In my view, especially on the issue of human rights, there's a lot that has to take place. And especially when it comes to free movement of persons, indeed, we have challenges. The recent developments in terms of deportation of Martha Karua and the rest, it was very unfortunate. Indeed, the Tanzanian government, if you look at the lens of the treaty and the Common Market Protocol, they didn't comply. The decision of Samuel Mukira Mohochi, which is a leading decision from the court, is out there. I mean, the Tanzanian government did not at all comply. And if these parties can sue, they have a remedy before the court. Now, maybe I can add something from the view of amendment of the treaty.
Maybe Osiemo, before you go on, if I could just ask something that you mentioned, the issue of free movement of services, especially in the legal sector. Where are we at with that? I know you practice in this whole region. Are we where the treaty anticipated, or where you anticipated as a believer in the East African community? I noticed we are now talking as we, and I think we have castigated the nationalistic tendencies. Are we where we feel that we've arrived? That we can
Thank you.
anywhere? Yeah.
We are not there because we have the Common Market Protocol, and there were annexures which should allow liberalization of free movement of services. But unfortunately, we have not reached there. There are so many impediments. For instance, if I pick out legal services alone, we don't have an agreement across the region. If I'm a Kenyan lawyer, I will not be allowed to Uganda or practice in Tanzania just like that. The governments are following nationalistic tendencies. So for instance, recently, the Senior Counsel Martha Karua applied to be admitted in Uganda, and there were challenges. It had to take the intervention of the Uganda Law Society and the Kenya Law Society for her to be issued with a special license. Just a special license. Now imagine now you're practicing there. It's a serious challenge. We have a challenge of Rwandans and Burundians practicing in Kenya. And that has escalated from the decision of the Law Society of Kenya versus the Attorney General, where the Court of Appeal held that Section 12 of the Advocates Act was amended without public participation and as such unconstitutional. And as such, we reverted back to the initial provision of the act that only allowed advocates from Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. So that means Rwanda, Burundi, and the rest are not permitted as we speak to practice in Kenya until an amendment has been done, which is yet to be coming. So, and that has also affected practice of Kenyans in Rwanda and Burundi because their provisions require reciprocity. There's no reciprocity. if I get from the legal sector and even go to other sectors, accountants, engineers, indeed we have serious challenges in the region. We need to open up these commitments partner states made. These commitments have to be made in reality, but the main issue is reciprocity. If we open up for maybe Tanzanians to come, have they opened for us in Tanzania? So that has really made partner states to maintain the status quo. That one partner state opens up, the other one refuses, and then they go back to where they were in the status quo is maintained. So I think we need goodwill from the leadership. If that cannot come, I think citizens of Jumuiya should take it up and challenge these provisions of the law. Partner states freely committed to comply. In fact, we were supposed to open up free movement of services by 2015. This is 2025. Nothing is moving. I can wholly say that at least these professionals can freely move it. There are serious challenges. You can remember some time back, there was a position in Tanzania's Vodacom, and a Kenyan was supposed to take over that position, but she was denied entry into Tanzania. And later she took a job in MTN, which is doing well. So I think we need goodwill from across the region. I'm not just saying any of the partner state is perfect. All of us are culprits. As a region, we need commitment and we need to comply with the Jumuiya laws that we committed to. Let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's just that you mentioned Senior Counsel Martha Karona. I thought, wow, let's hear from you because I know you have vast experience of practice in the region. Dr. Mbori, do you agree with Emily? Do you agree?
Yeah, I largely agree with her. Maybe I just wanted to add a few points here. I think maybe we also have a legal and a socio-political problem. The legal problem is that, as Emily said, we need, for example, as lawyers, to negotiate a mutual recognition agreement that is then going to enable this to happen for these services to cross across the borders. We haven't done that. The last time I checked, I think the engineers and the accountants might have a mutual recognition agreement negotiated already. Whether it's being implemented is another matter, as you all know. The lawyers, as it stands now, don't have this. And you can imagine there are many other professionals that need this, doctors, nurses, yeah, there are all kinds of, teachers, there are all kinds of professionals that would possibly want to, push their services across border. Thinking about the legal hurdles, for example, because this is mainly maybe one of the places which is close to us. There is a case where you have a scenario of a student, say, who studied law in Uganda. Imagine they have studied law in Uganda at Makerere University, and they decide that they don't want to go to their version of the postgraduate program in Uganda called I think LDC, if I'm not wrong. Ugandans will forgive me if I get that wrong. And they decide to go and do their postgraduate program, say in Kenya or possibly in Rwanda. We have had a decision in Uganda where a student did this. They did their postgraduate training in Rwanda. They came back and they applied for a job to work at the ODPP's office, the Director of Public Prosecution. And then they were told, you cannot do that because, that program in Rwanda, while it is okay, it is not the same as ours here. What you need to do is you need to go to a law firm, and then you need to work there or practice there, some sort of a pupillage for 6 months, and then we will consider whether you are ready. And the reasoning of the Ugandan legal council was that Rwanda has a system that is not common law. They still are working on a civil law system, and Uganda is common law, and therefore they are not compatible. And if you ask the Rwandan, they said, we moved from civil law a couple of years ago. In fact, we are now common law. In fact, our postgraduate program for law is designed in exactly the same way as that of Uganda. Now you start asking yourself, how is the Kenyan legal postgraduate program designed? How are the curriculums in the law schools in Kenya designed? As a Kenyan, I know we are even changing our curriculum from primary school going all the way up to high school. Can you have a system where you can have mutual recognition when the educational programs, for example, are at variance? And this might apply to all professions. If your education system is not the same as that of Tanzania, if then you have a CBC program which does it's designed, its philosophy, its mode of engagement is different from what is happening in another country, you can see then at the stage where someone now becomes a professional, you will have problems. And maybe these are the things we need to also think about more when we are talking about the processes of constitutionalization, so that we don't end up with this, again, colonial hurdles, saying, oh, this country is civil law, ours is common law, it's not compatible, you cannot practice in this country, you have to go and seek permission from so and so, and then we have all this gatekeeping programs. So I see the problem as systemic, wider than just, at the professional level where someone is already a doctor or a nurse or a teacher and they want to go and practice or want to get employment in another country. There's much, much more that still needs to be done at the levels of, integration of the systems we are dealing with. And that requires a lot of, a lot of hard work across the systems, a lot of hard thinking, and a lot of collaboration and speaking to each other that I think still needs to be done. Yeah.
Listening to the two of you again, it seems that we still have to wrestle colonialism in this realm, because as you talked about, for example, exchange of legal services, for example, my mind went to, I think it was the Raila Odinga trial. I was quite young then, followed from a distance. I think what his father did from a vice president is to get Queen's Counsel to come and represent him. Like, I remember that there was issue of clearance, but at least Queen's Counsel managed to come and argue the case. It seems that it was harder for Martha Karua to argue in Uganda than Queen's Counsel from England arguing in Kenya. This division between common law and civil law, still a colonial, really. And I think I'm beginning to be sort of this idea that perhaps synchronize the education system, at least generally, perhaps. And again, sitting where I sit, say, as dean of a law school, can assure you that it's easier to convert someone coming with a British qualification into a program than someone coming, say, from Congo. And every time you have to go and ask the National Qualifications Authority, what does this equate to in Kenya? And they take their time. I just sent somebody there the other day, and they're saying it was even wound out recently. You can see the kind of problems we're having as East Africans, even to access each other's educational system. And I think you just hit it. The other issue also that came to my mind was, do we have done better in the past, even as East Africans, than now? Because again, growing up, say, in Western Kenya, where I did, you're likely to find that a person my age was obviously taught by a Ugandan teacher, especially English. Do a survey. Out of 10, you'll find 2, 3 whose main teachers for English were from Uganda. There was a lot of freedom. People moved, and they were on, Teacher Service Commission salary in Kenya.
Okay.
So I don't know whether we are retrogressing. Just on my mind, but I think that's a discussion we can pick up as I give the floor to Melissa to say something. Then we come back to.
So yes or no? Wasn't there one law school in the beginning for all East Africa?
Actually, there was. In fact, the first Chief Justice from the University of Nairobi in Kenya is actually Maraga.
Oh.
Whether you think about Willy Mutunga, whether you think about Gisheru, whether you're thinking about Yesoni, all those are University of Dar es Salaam graduates. Top lawyers that taught us in the University of Nairobi, for example, I went to my undergrad, so mostly from Dar es Salaam. I think William Ruto would be the first president in Kenya from the University of Nairobi. Kibaki was a Makerere graduate.
Yeah.
So even access to the universities in the region was quite easy earlier. Now becomes quite difficult. Easy at that time because of colonial organization, harder because of our own intervention, which is really strange. It's actually an oxymoron. Is it a paradox? I don't know what to call it. But actually there's a problem there, and I agree. Thank you for
I just
reminding
wanted
that.
to remind our listeners, viewers, that we don't want to monopolize this conversation. There are perhaps historical perspectives we've forgotten. Remember, we are reviewing, so it's just us having a family meeting, asking, what have we done so far? What can we do better? So the Q&A is open for you. The comment section is open for you. If you would like to speak, also just let us know and we'll allow you to unmute as we move along. Prof, I know we've done 2 issues so far. You've spoken about state of democracy and human rights. I see we segue very well into cross-border professionalism, services, and of course, just not legal, as Emily said, but all other professions. I was even thinking about truck drivers, for example, and those on waterways, fisheries, and things like that. So I don't know what else you have in store for us in terms of the next big issues. But also just to acknowledge that our audience members are so diverse. I have news from our background team, who I thank so much, that we are covered EAC-wise.
That's great. That's great.
So karibuni, welcome. And maybe just to shout out of bias that we have our first year law students. So this is their first webinar. So for the panelists, don't scare them too much. So you can scare them more. But karibu sana, the May-August cohort of Kabarak Law School 2025. Yeah, I see they're in attendance as well. So Dean, no punishments.
No, they are good people. And I was their class last week. This is, I think, the second week of learning. The other one was orientation. So it's really nice to have them on board here.
So now they know of the muhuchis and the katabazis and so.
We will just ask Dr. Mbori to slow down, and Emily. At least Sambu teaches them so she would know how to.
I moved to Tanzania. It's okay.
Mungai, the next topic is quite scary. And this is peace and security in the region. This scares me. Sometimes when I do mapping, I get scared because I look at South Sudan. I don't know where to begin, where to end. I look at Uganda, and this is where you have to pray. Anything happening, say, even to the president, you don't know what happens there. You have his own son in charge of the military. You have his wife potentially president. Then you have the veterans. You don't know what they are planning. Remember, the Zimbabwe case told you the veterans will always have a plan. It is crazy. You go to Congo, whether it is the eastern part of Congo, and now they are taking over more cities, whether it is a former president, José Kabila, being denied diplomatic rights. You really don't know the ramifications of that. Then you come to our own country, Kenya. And what many people don't realize about Kenya is that it's like a swine, it's a swine. Peaceful on top, on the ground, a lot of kicking. Where we are we're just next to Baringo, we're between Baringo and Nakuru, actually on the border, Kabarak University. Down here, Marigat, Yati, a lot of cattle rustling, people were killed all the way to Marakwet, Pokot, Rukana. We've lost priests here.
Yeah.
It's crazy. How can people in this state of affairs actually even be federating the first place?
Yeah.
Would they not even have thought about, for example, putting the house in order first before we invite visitors? And one would have imagined, and I don't know, I'm actually coming to you, Sambu. That's why I spared you initially. One would have imagined that when we were three, at least we're used to each other, we're used to our own problems. We would have put our house in order first, invited a friend that looks like us, then another, then another. But here we are, South Sudan, Somalia, Congo, all with their unique problems. And all at once. Actually, if you look at the time lapse between one and the other joining, not that much. And even when we talk about South Sudan, yes, the North might not be in the federation, but it affects us. Just looking at the news item, yesterday, our own government is actually involved in the arms race. I don't know. Sambu, Please help us understand this and just put it in context and context.
Thanks, Professor. Yes, I think that when it was the three original, as they call the three, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, members, as the founders and member states of the community. There were less issues that relate to peace and security, really, and a lot of the what they called peace and security frameworks they set up then mostly dealt with crimes and cross-border crimes. So in as much as in the treaty in 1999, these founding members acknowledged that if you want to have a political federation, you have to have a peace and security angle to it. In as much as that was acknowledged in the treaty, it took a while for us to actually delve into peace and security. And the first effort was done in 2006 when the community came up with a peace and security strategy that mostly dealt with crimes. And at that time, yes, it was just the three, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. And then just to speak normatively, and then in 2012, we came up with a defense protocol and even provided that the community should have a mutual defense pact. And then in 2013, we came up with a peace and security protocol for the first time, and even a conflict resolution management and prevention mechanism that's very hard to find, actually. I was not able to find that document, but it's there. So you see that as we increase in membership, matters of peace and security also become real concerns for the community. But in terms of actually implementing the protocols that relate to peace and security, that has not yet been done fully or to the potential of the community. Currently, we have 8 members. So we have Somalia, South Sudan, the DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, and Kenya. Really, just Tanzania has no issues in terms of peace and security, but all the other 7 members have peace and security concerns in one way or another. So, and then you have 4 members of the community also being members of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, which heavily tackles peace and security and is not really a traditional REC, but it's a REC that was established for humanitarian reasons and then peace and security. So let me just gloss over country by country so that we have an understanding. Somalia has a problem with Al-Shabaab, which is a shared problem with Kenya, and to some extent, Uganda, although the attacks on Uganda have reduced, the Al-Shabaab has mostly been a threat to Kenya and Somalia. So Somalia has that, and Kenya has that. Somalia also currently has problems internally, disputes between the federal government and the federal member states. Somalia is a federal system country. So there are those issues that are threatening the peace of Somalia. And as we speak right now, Al-Shabaab is sort of making a comeback. Additionally, countries like Kenya, Uganda, and Burundi were part of the peacekeeping mission, the AU-mandated peacekeeping mission that was fighting Al-Shabaab in Somalia. ATMIS finished its term last year and transitioned to AUSOM currently, which is underfunded. I don't even think the word is underfunded. I think the word is it's facing a lot of uncertainty in terms of financial support. So then that means you have financial support, resurgence of Al-Shabaab, Somalia politically having problems between the federal government and the member states. That means the Al-Shabaab threat becomes even more real. And you still have Kenya and Uganda contributing troops to AUSOM. But yes, within the AU framework, also within the IGAD framework. And then you come to South Sudan. South Sudan currently, I think from late last year up to now, is also making political changes that are potentially going to destabilize the country. So fighting has resumed in parts of South Sudan, like Upper Nile, in terms of elite political arrangements. President Kiir has sacked members of the coalition government, SPLM and SPLM-IO. The Salva Kiir, who's the first Riek Machar, who's the first vice president, is under house arrest. And so people are afraid that the revitalized agreement that was signed is under threat on the South Sudan front. And then in addition to that, you have Ugandan troops in South Sudan supporting the government of South Sudan on whatever is going on right now politically. So you have Ugandan troops there as well. Uganda and South Sudan have their own defense pact. So Uganda is there because of the defense pact they have with South Sudan. And then you come to Rwanda, the DRC, the DRC, Eastern DRC, as you know, a lot is going on in Eastern DRC. And it's not just that the M23 have made a lot of gains and now administering territories in key parts of Eastern Congo, but it's also that Eastern Congo houses intentionally and also without wanting, it hosts a lot of the rebel groups that fight governments like the Rwandan government, the Ugandan government, and the Burundi government. That is why when the EACRF was deployed, which is the East African Regional Force, was first deployed to go and I don't know how to describe it because the words used were to deter dangerous forces in Eastern Congo. When the EACRF basically was dispatched, the countries that contributed to the force were deployed in specific areas of Eastern Congo, mainly to ensure that they fight their own rebel groups opposed to their own governments. It's like go into Eastern DRC as Uganda, sort out your issues with ADF, the Allied Democratic Forces. Burundi, go and sort out your issues with Red Tabara. So even the deployment pattern was acknowledged the fact that some non-state armed groups that are fighting members of the community are housed in the DRC. So there was that, and the whole EACRF thing did not end well. It has been dramatic, but just to say that the DRC, apart from the ongoing conflict between the government and the M23 and the government and Rwanda, there's also the fact that non-state armed groups that are opposed to Uganda, Burundi, or Rwanda also hide in Eastern DRC. And that has complicated issues because ever since we deployed the first ever East African regional force to the DRC for a peace and security mission, it complicated relations within the community. It's not just that Rwanda and the DRC escalated, but it's also that Burundi and Rwanda ended up closing. Burundi closed the border, its border with Rwanda because it claimed that Rwanda was supporting Red Tabara, a rebel group in Eastern DRC, opposed to the Burundi government. So really, it's just Tanzania that does not have a lot of issues on peace and security. But so yeah, that's the state, just to paint the picture.
It looks very bad. And what is making it worse from just what you said is we don't appear to have capacity to intervene internally. And when we intervene, in fact, we are causing more problem to the fire. We're adding fuel to the fire. And I think as a Kenyan, I know that, for example, in Eastern DRC, we're not even needed there. Do you see any hope there? Do you see anything we can do as East Africans to right things and something within our reach, not necessarily idealistic? Do you see any hope? Would IGAD be one of them? I don't know. What do you see?
I don't know. I don't see any hope. Not because I'm hopeless. I'm generally an optimistic person, but I don't see any hope because we have a peace and security protocol that permits the community to even engage in conflict resolution or prevention management, but that has not been utilized. So rather to say that Jumuiya, I think, is trying as much as possible to avoid activating its peace and security aspect. I think it's trying.
Mandate, yeah.
Because even when things got out of hand in South Sudan, everyone was releasing a statement from IGAD, the UN, the African Union. The EAC said nothing. The only time the EAC has addressed issues of peace and security has been when it has come to the DRC, and it had to. And even the way it addressed it was, I don't know, it seemed rushed, in my opinion, coming up with an EAC regional force, setting up the activating peace and security for the DRC. The same month, it was actually admitted as a full member. I mean, it took a few days just to now say, yes, we're going to get into the DRC issue. It felt transactional, as if it was a transactional admission into the, I don't know, between the community then as it was constituted and the DRC. But also to say that apart from the community trying to avoid getting into peace and security matters, members of the community that have heavy peace and security issues are using other avenues to sort out those issues. So for example, the Somalia one, Somalia is now a member of the EAC, it's a new member, but issues of Al-Shabaab, in as much as they have effects throughout the community, are being tackled at either the AU or the IGAD level. So I think it was last month or late March? I think it was last month when members of IGAD actually met on the Somalia issue. AU saw how to tackle Al-Shabaab, and so they met. And you see, 4 members of the EAC are in IGAD. So it's difficult. I don't know. I don't know why we have a peace and security. I think it's important to have that mechanism, but I don't think the community is ready to really engage it.
I also don't think so. And as you continue to speak, I'm more entrenched in the view that we probably need an outsider here. Because it seems like we have interests in one another's country, and the interests are not good at all. For the first time in a long while, we actually have a case among ourselves, isn't it? The DRC is having a case for the first time against Rwanda, isn't it? New members having cases. Well, we've never had cases. In fact, we used to say earlier that African leaders solve their issues as was they retreat to, to an environment where they have a drink or whatever it is, then they negotiate the issue. They don't come to the courts against each other. Now we have one. I also saw something very interesting. I haven't seen that in diplomatic circles in a long while. A statement from Kenya to Somalia. It's an open secret that Kenya supports the idea of disintegration of Rwanda. I think it's an open secret because Kenya thinks that its peace that lies in breaking, not Rwanda, Somalia, breaking Somalia into some components, especially those regional units, especially Jubaland and Somaliland. I hope it was fake news actually for the first time. I saw a memo from Kenyan government to actually diplomatic communication from Kenyan government to Somali government, telling them that yes, we respect you, we continue working with you, but also we continue working with these 2 entities in your space. Very disturbing, especially if you're looking at this scenario you've just painted, Sambu. I don't know what Dr. Mbori thinks about these things. I'm just talking like just sort of like a common person with problems on his head. Remember what Imbuga said: if the burdens of a nation, this time is actually the burdens of an entire region on your shoulder, you must speak like that randomly without much order. And as Dr. Mbori speaks, I think Ms. Mungai will also be checking if there are any comments up to this point on the chat. Then Dr. Mbori will be able to take some 2, 3, 4 comments.
We're privileged to have our comrade in power, Gloria Kimani.
Yeah.
This is just to alert you that once Dr. Mbori is done, you can also make your intervention, whether on this peace and security issue or any other matter that we've been reviewing so far. We'd really love to hear from you and Karibu. Dr. Mbori, go on.
Yeah, I think I want to agree with both of you, Prof and Chep. I am a bit I'm a bit more optimistic than the two of you, cautiously so, about the kind of ways in which some of our problems can be resolved. It's important to think about some of them also in context. You know, the African Union has had this phrase, and it's a phrase that the African Union keeps on repeating, that African problems should have African solutions. So I think some people critique it, some people don't agree with it, but I'm a bit sympathetic to this view. I find it a little bit sad sometimes that, you know, some of our leaders have to, even though, Prof, you said if they sit on themselves, they can decide, they have to sit in Qatar. And then it's after they have been sitting in Qatar, that's when you see movement. But when they meet in Addis, sometimes, you know, you don't see the kind of sort of movement that is really expected out of these people. So I still think that if we push our dimensions, if we go back to the Pan-African spirit that was embodied with some of the early African leaders like Julius, you know, Nyerere, you know, Madiba, Mandela was, you know, involved in this, Kwame Nkrumah, some of these views of, you know, thinking about some of our problems are problems that we can solve internally. I think there is a high possibility that these problems can be resolved. And this I say fully cognizant of what you both of you had mentioned, or I think Prof you mentioned. We are ourselves intertwined or involved in entwined in some of these problems. So Kenya cannot then say that it's going to be, you know, mediate in Sudan or South Sudan when it is itself being accused of, you know, facilitating some of these problems. Rwanda cannot do the same for DRC when it is being accused, and Uganda the same. You see, so that sort of creates a bit of a problem. Somalia, I think, you know, Chep did a very good sort of lay of the land. You sort of see, you know, how some of these problems are interconnected. However, even despite this caveat, remain a little bit more optimistic that if we push ourselves a little bit more, if we go back to our philosophical ideals and our history, we can solve some of these problems peacefully. And peacefully here involves going to court, because if you go to court, it means that you're not, you possibly agree that you're not going to fight, you know, with firearms. It's a much better way of resolving the conflict, if at all it can or can provide an avenue of holding people accountable, than, you know, going to war or remaining perpetuating war within the region. Yeah, I think I can stop there so that we can hear from Gloria. I think
just before you stop,
yeah,
Somalia has won again a case against Kenya at the
yes,
ICJ.
yes.
Do you think it has made the situation better?
Yeah, in terms of implementation, I do not, I cannot necessarily say whether the situation has been better, but that this was one of those cases which African states have been fighting. You know, it's not new that African states have taken each other to court over a boundary, whether maritime or land-based disputes. We even had another one just recently, I think, involving Guinea, if I'm not wrong, or yeah, or Guinea-Bissau. I'm not very sure. From the ICJ recently, we've had you know, cases in Africa on this, you know, Burkina Faso, Mali, even in the south, boundary dispute. So when it comes to boundary, it seems that African, you know, heads of government or African states are much more willing sometimes to, subject themselves to, a third party neutral arbiter who's going to say, okay, this is where we're going to draw the line, and this is the reason why we're going to draw the line there. So in that is the context in which I see the Kenyan-Somali dispute, and I will find it a little bit absurd or actually a huge violation of the rule of law if Kenya were to go against that decision that they lost against Somalia. But when the disputes are more politically salient, I would say, the ones that have involved the use of armed violence. And the best example also that go to the ICJ is this, military activities in the DRC, where the DRC won against Uganda. The stakes then become a little bit higher. So that I think is good. And I think that conflict, that issue was resolved well. In fact, the decision, of compensation just came out in 2022, and Uganda committed that it is going to pay, and it had started paying, Yeah. Whether the money is getting to the victims is a story for another day. Let me stop there, Prof.
We're going to come back. I got to believe we're going to come back. Jentrix, get ready, because I'm really also keen on pursuing this discussion further. I think it's a big one. Thank you.
Well, we wanted to hear from Gloria. I don't know if she's ready now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And we can see you as well. Well,
Okay, I don't know. Okay.
Yes, there you are. Karibu.
Thank you very much. It's afternoon, everyone. My name is Gloria Kimani. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, also practicing in the firm of Mbori Kimani. I'm also a council member of the Law Society of Kenya and a proud alumni of Kabarak University. This is my engagement, yes. And it's great to be in such a panel also and discuss about what has been going on in the region, being a trial observer and a jurist in that sense. And also being able to be here, being moderated by a Prof who, he may not know this, but in first year he used to come as a guest lecturer in constitutional law classes, autochthony of the Constitution. He's the one who taught us. Till today, I still
Masquerade.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes. So maybe just to go in and dive into the conversation. I don't know why Emily is very shy to say that we first met or second met during the trial observation of Dr. Besigye. And it's one of the things that we have been trying to do as a Jumuiya. Jumuiya is now known, I think it is Sambu who said it's an elitist, but I totally think it's a power dynamic. It's a political thing. When we say about East African community, it's only the political powers that talk about East African community, but the citizens themselves have never come actually together to talk about the East African community and actually to be involved in the affairs of the Jumuiya as we know it. So I think it is a great step where actually the Jumuiya, the citizens of the Jumuiya are actually coming up and actually being involved in other people's affairs, not interfering, as it was said by the CS or the Prime Secretary, interfering with other people's affairs. But I think it's rightfully so, because I'm very glad that we did start with the Jumuiya anthem. And one of the chorus of the Jumuiya anthem is very clear that Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuwajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu Jumuiya yetu. And so if we leave it to the politicians only to talk about the Jumuiya, I think we'll have lost it. And the citizens themselves are just led by politicians who we know actually are there for their political interests and not necessarily the interests of the Jumuiya. And this was reiterated by the Prime Secretary, where he said that he will not defend or he will not speak up for those of us who are considered prohibited immigrants, and he'd rather protect the what did he say? He'd rather protect the interests of the nation instead of actually protecting the rights of the citizens. So yes, that's just in brief what I have been doing. And I think this is not the first time that actually the Jumuiya has been coming together, or persons in the Jumuiya actually supporting other people in the Jumuiya. We have seen, let's start with the late John Pombe Magufuli. When Raila Odinga was vying for president against Mwai Kibaki, John Pombe Magufuli actually came to Kenya, was allowed in Kenya, and participated in a political process in Kenya. And that shows you that the Jumuiya has always been together. And that time, we had not seen quite a deterioration of the human rights as we are seeing, a regression of the human rights as we are seeing now. And maybe just to have an overview of what has been happening maybe in each East African country is that we are seeing, and just before I finish that, we need to also remember that citizens or even politicians or even citizens supporting each other. We need to remember when where was it? Was it in Zambia? When the president, the former president, Kenneth Kaunda, was actually arrested for treason. If it was not for the interference of Julius Nyerere and Nelson Mandela, he would not have been released from prison. So having citizens or other people from other countries coming to support or show solidarity for other people, I think has always been there. And I would have loved to answer the question, maybe now I'm answering, where Prof had asked, is it Kenya's Nikiherere Tukonayo? No, it's not. It's us actually in our mandate as East Africans to actually support and actually talk of what is happening in other countries. And we know there are some types of repressions that even citizens in this country cannot speak. But what I can truly tell you as part of a trial observer, and what the citizens say and what the politicians say are quite different. They actually appreciate the efforts and the courage that we do have in going to speak for them, where in places they can't speak. And we have seen this, and maybe I will delve into maybe what happened to Boniface Mwangi and Agatha, and the need of us East Africans to actually speak what is happening in other people's countries. And the sad part why maybe we don't know what is happening in Tanzania. A great friend of mine, I don't know why, Generali Ulimwengu, said, why people don't know what is happening in Tanzania, because they fight in Kiswahili and everything is done in Kiswahili. Even Kenyans, when we hear or we read even Taifa Leo, we cannot be able to read it because it's so complex for us. So we will never know what is actually happening in Kiswahili, because when a Tanzanian comes and speaks here in Kiswahili, before we actually truly understand what is going on, we have maybe lost attention because there are words that have passed us and we really can't understand what is happening. So I think why now people are realizing what is happening in Tanzania is because now there's another voice that has come and it's speaking in maybe English, a language that maybe everybody is able to understand. So I think those are some of the things that maybe we need to look into. Yeah, maybe just briefly, Kenyans, I think we have seen from what has been happening in the country, we are having now, it's like a crime holding a protest, and also expressing ourselves. We have had when people express themselves, and I have had the privilege of actually being the advocate from the Law Society of Kenya, actually going to mostly the police stations and also to the courts when people are arrested during protests, when people are arrested when they actually express their views, especially on Twitter, on X. And I have also been the one who has been there when all these boys, especially of abduction cases, have been released. And the stories you hear of torture, what happened to them, I think this has been, it's something that we saw in the Mbori era, which we are now actually seeing it's on the rise in the current regime. So I think this has been it has been going down. Actually, the repression has been more and more in our country from when the regime started. And I think it's time for us to actually fight against those things. We have also been seeing these things have been followed very closely with what has been happening in Uganda. It looks like the right to protest has always, in Uganda, even if it is a constitutional right, it has been criminalized. And this we see even if anybody has had a chance to read the amended charge sheet of the treason charge sheet of Besigye. They also talk about him rallying the country into going for a protest when there was a rise in food, in the increase of food supplies, there was economic challenges. So he called for a fight, not for a fight, he called for a protest, a nationwide protest, which also led him to prison at that time. I think it was maybe 2015 or 2005, I'm not so sure of the dates. And he was actually charged with treason, which has never been concluded till today. The cases were withdrawn and till today nothing has happened, and now he's in court again. Still, those things still follow him. An interesting part is now the use of X and their chief of military, who's the son to the president, Muhoozi. And it's very interesting that he actually tweeted that one of the supporters of he calls him Bobi Wine, he will be actually tortured. And actually that happened. What is very surprising is the courts in Tanzania, in Uganda, have not been actually firm in protecting the human rights. We saw when that person was brought to court, when he tried telling the court that he had been tortured, the court just sent him back to remand with no even access to medical assistance. And that's quite telling of what is happening in Uganda. And this is the thing, if we do not speak of what is happening in Uganda, it will start now coming to Kenya. Surprisingly, the mother of all tortures, and I will say this without fear, is Tanzania. One of the things after we were denied entry, and so I first got into Tanzania like 1 month ago, the first appearance of Tundu Lissu. We were not actually able, we went as trial observers, and we were not able to go to court because there was violence in court and the police were beating up the people who were going to court. So we were advised, for security purposes, don't go because you might get up, or you might get caught up. And the following day, we actually took statements of those people who were beaten up. And we can actually see the trends that have been happening in Kenya, Uganda, happening in Tanzania. And one of the things which you will also see that they beat these people in sensitive areas, and there was an element of sexual assault, which you wouldn't understand until the Tanzanians actually tell you it is normal. When somebody is arrested, when they go through interrogation, sexual assault is a form of interrogation in Tanzania. And that's why we even had the Tanzanian MP saying, but we have been arrested. It is part of the system. Why are they complaining? So why it is very difficult to comprehend that aspects of torture have been actually normalized in this kind of places. We have seen last year in Chadema when the Chadema officials were appointed, some of them were abducted and one of them was killed. And they found that what happened to JM Karaoke, where acid was poured on their face, is happening in Tanzania. So these are the kind of developments that are happening, and I think we need to talk about them in the Jumuiya. I think for the denial of entry, Emily has really covered it well with the case of Samuel versus what is it called, the AG Uganda. Yes. So I think that will be it for me for now, unless there are any questions. Yes.
I believe there even could be a rebuttal. Thank you so much, Glory. I didn't even know that you are one of us. I've just seen you being a celebrity in other spaces, but to know that you're one of us is truly an honor.
Quite good. And I think for first years,
Not doctored.
they need to know that you can be Gloria.
Yes, you can
in
be
a very
a
short time.
Gloria.
Yeah.
I saw another comrade of ours who's been supporting us since day one, Dr. Silvanus Wekesa, and I hope I said the first name correctly. And as Dr. you're getting ready to intervene, if you're still interested, I see two comments in the chat box, and I'll just read them out quickly. We have many friends today. Have you seen that name, Professor Johanna Gaddafi? I wonder who that is.
The same one.
Is it the same
Yeah,
one? Oh,
it's-
okay. So he poses this question to Dr. Mbori. What's the reason for your cautious optimism for African solutions to African problems? Yeah, it's that Gaddafi. Yeah, it's that one. Isn't it the case that of late, and especially in East Africa, we, the political elite, in brackets, largely reinforce each other's bad behavior? The panel has also detailed how various EAC countries routinely disregard orders of the EACJ. This was also one of the recent developments we were to canvass on recent jurisprudence. So how do you reconcile this with your proposed solution for using the courts to try resolve some of the recent challenges in the region? And he wishes us, great deliberations and all that from, how do you say that word? Heidelberg?
Unajua,
Please, Gaddafi,
tell
this
Gaddafi
is,
to speak
yeah,
about
please, this is East
President-
African
President
community.
matters.
Because your location in Europe, we welcome it, and thank you for joining us as well. Then we also have George Skem, who is a student leader here at Harvard Law School, among many other things that he does. But George Skem is asking Jentrix if the people of EAC member states are increasingly relating across borders, but political leaders continue to display authoritarian tendencies. Are we genuinely moving toward a safer political federation? I think this is that question you said you'd come back to, Prof, and thank God he was listening, so that Jentrix can pick it up on youth participation. Can integration succeed where elite political will among leaders is lacking, or does retrenchment threaten the success of the political federation, considering the political federation as a long-term goal? Thank you so much, Skem, for being with us. And yeah, Dr. Wekesa? Yes, I see his hand is raised. We can
Okay,
allow you
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much. Due to the constraint of time, I'll try to be brief on this issue.
Yeah.
I just have 3 points to put across, and maybe we later on in another forum we can deliberate. The first thing I think, which you didn't touch on, and which perhaps leads to this, people keep on asking themselves, what is happening in the East African community? But there is one major underlying thing within the East African community, whether it's now or even before 1977, it is built on personal friendships. That is something people forget about, that the EAC is built on personal friendships. And in the likelihood of event of the friendship breaks down, the community also breaks down. We have so many cases to show that. When Jakaya Kikwete fell out with Paul Kagame, the EAC's ground to a halt. The whole politics of the coalition of the willing comes from that. So once you understand that, then you can easily decipher what is happening within the region right now. Yeah. The politics of interference haven't started now. Julius Nyerere is revered as somebody who used to intervene. He didn't intervene in Uganda because he really loved Ugandans. No, he intervened in Uganda because his friend Obote had been overthrown by Idi Amin, and he went there to save his friend. So it wasn't because of altruistic reasons that he loved Ugandans so much, or he loved the region so much, so he sent his forces into Uganda. No, all of it was because of his personal friendship with Obote. And you can look at all examples. You can come to the modern times. William Ruto, the current president of Kenya, went and campaigned for Museveni in Uganda. In 2022, he tried to go to Uganda to visit. He was blocked to go to Uganda by Uhuru Kenyatta's regime, saying he's going to bring Museveni to interfere in Kenya's elections. Yeah. Somebody rightfully mentioned there that Magufuli campaigned for Raila. When Raila was running in 2017 and Magufuli was president, Magufuli never set foot in Kenya to campaign for Raila because Magufuli had become a president. And by then, he was emboldened to the current president of Kenya. Okay? Second issue is we need to look at the question of leadership. There is a dearth of leadership in the region at the moment. Gone are the days of the philosophical Nyereres of this world. We now have a very new generation of leaders. I think Kagame and Museveni, who understand what it means to be within the Jumuiya, the new crop of leaders we have in the region don't actually understand what it means. Museveni and Kagame understand because they've lived through wars, they've lived in all these capitals in the process of revolution in their countries. If you ask William Ruto, maybe he's never lived in any other capital apart from Eldoret, Sugoi, or Nairobi. So he can't comprehend what it means, Jumuiya means, yeah? So unless we start addressing the issue of leadership at the top, which actually understands what Jumuiya means, the goals, the aspirations of the people, then maybe the whole normative framework of the people-centeredness will come into fore. I expected some of these leaders to push through the changing of the treaty to bring in the people to play a bigger role in the running of the community. For instance, something as basic as directly electing members of the East African Legislative Assembly. It continues to remain an exclusive affair of the political parties, some that don't even exist, some don't even represent the aspirations of the people. Secondly, you have a situation where now the East African community does not comment on the internal affairs of member states. Name me one incident where EAC has ever commented on anything. Whether you are killing your own citizens, you're arresting your own citizens, they always keep quiet. They never comment on anything. So what happened in Tanzania last week? Surprisingly, it's not the first time. It's just that I think it's happening at a moment when people have a stronger voice in this issue. Go back in time. Alamin Kimathi, foremost activist in Kenya, went to Uganda to stand in solidarity with some Kenyans who had been arrested after the bombing of the World Cup scene. Museveni jailed him for 1 year. You know, so this solidarity hasn't started now. And the reaction of these countries have always been harsh because they feel like somebody is coming to interfere in their legal process. Last year I was on a panel with Besigye. He came to Kenya, and I think Chepkorir is aware. I was on a panel with him. He came to Kenya, he spoke. Nobody bothered with him. I was surprised that a few months later, he's coming to be abducted here. I don't know what God has done what. It is very difficult for citizen loyalty in the East African community because, number one, the citizens don't know what that Jumuiya is all about. We, the people who call ourselves the middle class, we, the people who've gone to school, we might know the normative framework. We know about what it is, but we don't believe in it at all. Maybe, I think the lawyers might be the only ones because we have the East African Law Society. They try, but the rest of the population are actually ignorant of what the EAC is all about. And that's why our leaders take advantage of that. It remains a club, an exclusive club of presidents to make decisions. And for me, I always believe that the EAC suffers from a legitimacy crisis. I don't think it represents anyone of the East African citizens. You look at the organs, the summit, it's just presidents, yet it's the one that makes decisions. The council, made of ministers, simply a government representation. The East African Legislative Assembly, we saw how it makes decisions. The East African Court of Justice, all of us remember the Anyang' Nyong'o case when they ruled against the Kenyan government. What did the Kenyan government do? They moved an amendment. First of all, to deal with the judges, to make the court weak. Right now, the court can't function because it doesn't have money. You know, so they deliberately weaken institutions that try to counter their powers. So what should we as citizens do? The current clamor for this solidarity should not just end in going to attend court cases. We need to push our leaders, especially the members of parliament, to push through parliament to change the treaty so that we can at least have an opportunity to vote directly members of the East African Legislative Assembly. We don't need them to be sending their sons and daughters in that parliament when they don't do anything. With that, we can copy the EU model. How does Nigel Farage become a leader in Europe? Because he campaigned on that platform. He went around UK selling things against the EU, you know, but he was still elected. So if we have members campaigning for a seat at the East African Legislative Assembly, we will spread the word across the region. You can now stand up and do an opinion poll. Go to my village in Bungoma. I don't think they understand what Boniface Mwangi was doing in Tanzania. And then when you tell them this thing about Jumuiya, they'll be like, but what was he doing there? And actually, when you ask a lot of citizens, there's an element of them believing that actually the likes of Boniface Mwangi, Gloria, Martha Karua were actually interfering in another country's affairs. That is the genuine public opinion. But in reality, there was solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Tanzania. Then the question you push back is, are the East African citizens speaking one language? Absolutely not. Because if you drive just across to Uganda, to Tanzania, to Rwanda, to DR, I've just come from Goma. You go to speak to the citizens in Goma, they have a totally different opinion about the East African community. So we need to find a collective voice as citizens of the community, and then push our leaders to make those changes. Okay? Then finally, before I shut up, is strategy. There've been a lot of debates on how did Tanzania know. If you've ever gone to Tanzania, is even when you're going to attend a conference, you pay a permit. The moment you say I'm attending a conference, they tell you you're working, you pay a permit. They're very peculiar with the way they operate. And you ask yourself, how was Martha Karua allowed? I mean, despite the objection in Uganda, she was finally given a certificate to represent Besigye. Why has it turned the tide in Tanzania? Yeah. Somebody mentioned Kikwete and Mukapa came to mediate. That wasn't because Kikwete and Mukapa loved Kenya. That was AU. They didn't come here out of their own volition. It was the AU that actually facilitated that. So there is still a lot of bilateral building, engagement, and what have you. The Tanzanian-Kenyan schism didn't start now. I mean, as volatile as the Tanzanian parliament was, that has always been their views towards the Kenyan citizens. The two countries have never, Chepkorir always argues about foreign policies that are citizen-led. These two countries have never wanted to sit down to try and bridge the divide since the Nyerere-Kenyatta divide. Never. We've just been building on that suspicion and anger and everything. And I can assure you, if you go to Dar right now, those sentiments you saw in parliament, it's what is the people are saying. You can hear even their musicians, what the people are saying. And then you come back to hear Kenyan reactions. Oh, let's boycott Diamond. Oh, let's boycott so and so. You see, we are very quick to react on something that actually is not our own making. We are just caught up in a rivalry that does not really matter to us. So if we citizens can build on this solidarity that we're trying to create and move it away from the emotive political angle, let's do the cultural aspect. I saw Kenyans saying, oh, let's boycott Kilimanjaro Marathon. Oh, I was planning to go to Tanzania, now I can't go. How are you solving the situation? Tomorrow, after boycotting Kilimanjaro Marathon, when you tell Tanzanians I'm in solidarity with you, will they look at you and tell you, okay, welcome? Because it's allowed, the anger and the emotional reaction. But we as citizens need to take charge of that coordination and that relation. If we leave it to our leaders, the Kenyan parliament tomorrow will pick up the issue. They will say very nasty things to us Tanzanians, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So at that point, I don't know, Gloria can maybe enlighten us. Have they managed to get any form of community-led solidarity among the Tanzanians? Because where I sit, this solidarity is elite-led. It's not different from what the presidents are doing. And that's why they appear aloof and they appear like they're speaking to themselves. How do we bring in the whole community into believing in what we are doing so that we also don't get caught up in these state-led ideas? Because as much as I'm concerned, I generally don't think what the likes of Boniface were doing was actually communicating to the larger Tanzanian population. It actually fits into the narrative that the president was saying. Kenyans have come to interfere in our affairs. And then the reaction of Kenyans actually led to that. Kenyans, we are calling them, they've never gone to school, they are backward, they are primitive, they can't speak English. You don't help the cause. It's at that point now we need to solidify and look, we don't speak fluent Swahili like you, but we are with you. But our reaction, if you look at what Kenyans are saying, I don't think Jumuiya has any hope to build a citizen-led integration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ring.
Very, very informative session there. And then,
never go wrong.
yeah.
with Silvanus.
and I like the interjections of the Q&A session that we've had,
Yeah.
illuminating value adding, challenging, questioning, all those good things that we love in academic circles. But two people mentioned. One is Lynette I keep calling her Lynette because of another Lynette. Emily Osiemo. Emily, I think you have mentioned, and Gloria just alichoma. Walisemaje?
Divert information.
She divulged information that you have not told us yet. Do you want to say something? And I know we had agreed that you'll be leaving shortly. And also for all of us, I think we have another 15 minutes and we'll be wrapping up. But you are mentioned. And I think it's good that you also have a go at this. And then Dr. Mbori, you also asked a specific question from a country I cannot.
We have a city we can't.
We said in East Africa, we talk about residency. And that person is not a resident, but we'll see how you answer that. Okay, Emily, let's have a go then, Dr. Mbori.
Thank you. We've been with Gloria in this quest for rule of law in East Africa. So I appreciate that she managed to join us. We met in the observation mission in the Kiza Besigye matter, and we keep following up on it. Maybe my last parting shot will be that despite all the challenges we have as a community, let's not give up on it. Whatever little contribution that we make here and there builds to the community. No matter the challenges we face from the leadership, I think one day, one time, maybe things will work out. Even the European Union has challenges, not all community. Even if you go to ECOWAS, SADC, they have challenges. In fact, we are lucky in the East African community that we even have a court. SADC doesn't have a court you can go to and challenge any issue. So let's just keep our hope alive. If you have any contribution to make, you have a case to appear and represent parties. Write to the Secretary General. If there are amendments that are being made and citizens are not aware, I've taken this initiative myself, wrote to the Secretary General when I saw a memo last year from Ministers of Foreign Affairs and EAC saying that they are intending to have amendments to the treaty. So I asked, how can amendments to the treaty be done without consultations from or participations of the citizens? Because this is a people-centered community. And the Secretary General wrote back to me that they had just started the process. They will involve citizens. But let's just be on the alert. Whenever we see developments, lawyers, let's be able to contribute to the community. I wouldn't want to say much.
If I may bother you even for 2 minutes or 3, this treaty has done 25 years. Okay? Initially, we thought of ourselves as the old East African community. Now we are many. It's a big crowd now. What are some of these things that you think we need to think about, even in that review process, when and if, for example, the opportunity arises for us to make amendments? What do you think are things we need to really talk about? Is the treaty adequate? Has it served us well? Are there gaps? Really, if you could just point us to things to start thinking about, maybe on our own later after this particular conversation.
Thank you. In my view, we need to have amendments around access to the court. I feel the impediments they have put for 2 months, that a person has to be a resident for you to access the court, those kind of amendments are necessary. We need amendments around the issues to do with representation, especially the YALA. Mostly the representation that we have is from cronies and people who know someone in the VIP circle. If you don't know anyone, you cannot get there. We need amendments in terms of how people are nominated to the court. There has been an opaque process. The executive has to locate you or know you, and then you get there. but people are qualified, who have the requisite qualifications, do not get these chances. And as a result, we have challenges even in the jurisprudence of the court, because if you give someone who doesn't have any idea on international law or regional law, what kind of jurisprudence does the court make? That has an issue. We need amendments in terms of participation of the citizens when it comes even to amendments. As the treaty is, if you look at Article 150, it doesn't mention citizens anywhere. Yet, people-centeredness is a principle in the treaty. The only thing it says that the Secretary General will get suggestions of amendments, and then she or he will circulate them to the partner states. But at what point do people participate? So we end up not having meaningful participation. So we really need in our structures to have proper involvement of the people. Otherwise, as the treaty is now, it is just a class of the VIPs and the government officials. So whatever they'll be suggesting is just for their own benefit, so that then the people have no idea of what's going on. We need amendments on funding of the community. I think the model we have now is not working. The community is paralyzed. The court can't work because some people have denied, some states are not contributing. We need serious amendments on it, so that if there are other mechanisms of contributing, let them be allowed. Not only we wholly rely on partner states when they decide that now the community is taking positions that are against a specific government, they will not fund it. So we have so many issues that we need to take to look at. I think because of time, I'll just have to stop here. Thank you.
That's quite good. And thank you very much for educating us for free.
Yeah.
All we needed is to tune in. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
As Achille spoke, I just thought that we'll transcribe this.
Of course.
And publish.
Of course.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
True.
Dr. Mbori, remember you were asked a specific question, but also you can build on what Osiemo spoke about. Especially, I think she went to the issue of jurisprudence. She talked about who are jurisprudence in the court, East African Court of Justice, but she also talked about poor funding. I think since we are wrapping up, you could do all this and just wrap up, so that again, I give a chance to Jentrix and then Sambu. Then we are good to go.
Thank you, Prof. And indeed, it's been a wonderful session. In terms of closing, let me make this as short as I can, because we have spent some good time together already. I think when the first question that my good friend Joanna Gaddafi asked from Heidelberg, which is in Germany, is this question of how do we, the political elite, largely reinforce each other's bad behavior. I think I would be a bit careful to say that I am part of the political elite, but I think I am part of an elite, or many of us in this session are part of a specific elite, whether it's an academic elite or a professional elite, and many of us here are part of a professional group. And this ties a little bit with what Sylvanus was speaking about, which I mostly agree with. However, we should see it as, we have different types of, political elites or elites generally. We have a political elite that, especially of this type that we have seen in East Africa recently, that is very hegemonic, very high-handed, and very dictatorial, which is the one that I don't think many of us support. Many of us are actually part of a resisting elite. And we even have a political elite that is part of the resisting class of this hegemonic political elite. So we have to locate ourselves, whether you are supporting of the status quo or you are resisting. And many Gen Zs, as we have seen from last year, and we continue to see, especially with their very strong sort of views on politics in social media and in action, because when they started last year, some of us, the old guard, now have become part of this old guard, including Professor Ambani, said, "Oh, these guys are going to make noise on social media." these guys cannot put their feet on the ground. They cannot bring it to the streets. And when they brought it to the streets, many of us were like, yeah, this is real political mobilization, and I hope this can continue. And we also have a huge some of the resisting political elite that is now being co-opted to join the hegemonic elite, whether professional or different kind. So we have to ask ourselves, where are we located? Are you part of the hegemonic elite? Are you part of the resisting elite? Or are you being, if you're in the resisting group or in the hegemonic group, are you being co-opted one or the other? Possibly there are some who are struggling, even among the political elite. And that's sort of, how I think about this from a very academic, possibly theoretical view of what is happening on the ground. The second question was about the ESJ. I'll put all my comments on the ESJ as one so that it's short. One, the decision of these countries are routinely disregarded. Some of us have argued that we need to see our court as a space for not just compliance. This is a theory of beyond compliance, so that it's just not about complying when we take of these cases. These cases have very many ways of serving the aims of protecting the rule of law. Sometimes we take these cases to court just to name and shame. Just to name and shame, so that people know that this is something that is happening in the region. Sometimes we take these cases to court just to document history. Just that, just to document history, so that when the children of our children will come one day, will say, we did not just sit to let this torture happen. We did not just sit there and let it happen. Whether someone gets a remedy out of it or not, we are just trying to document the history of this process. Sometimes we take these cases so that we can just get one judge to give a dissenting opinion, which will then become the majority opinion in future. So it's true that our political elite does not like or has been resisting to comply, but we have to think about how these cases operate beyond compliance. And some of us, that's how we think mostly when we do or are engaged in public interest litigation. We are not just seeing these cases as cases in which you will want the state to comply. If they do, and sometimes they do because of their own interest, well and good, but many a times they don't. Finally, on the funding crisis, I agree with Emily, this needs an amendment. I think some of the debates have been, why are we insisting on the same, we have an equality system in the East African community. Each member has to give the same amount of money. And this, as some people have said, creates a problem. We should create a system where different members, based on their own abilities, give different amounts. I don't know whether that will solve the problem, because the problem is, in a large sense, a problem of intransigence. You don't find some of these countries not paying, for example, some of their dues in some of the other, international organizations that they belong to. In fact, some of them pay beforehand, and then when it comes to the EAC, they're not paying. So you can see that sometimes the funding crisis we're facing in the community is part of just an intransigent political elite, which only deals, like Dr. Wekesa was saying, because of political friendship. I will do it if this community is serving my interest. I will not do it when the community is not serving my interest. So that's how I see it. And I think that we should be at the level of pushing people-centered community by increasingly saying that this community should be constitutionalized. I started by saying that, and let me close by that. And one way of constitutionalizing the community is insisting more on public participation. In most of our regional constitution, the only way you ensure that the local person, as we call them in Kenya, Wanjiku, participate in the process, is we have tried as much as possible to infuse the value of public participation. The people must participate. So the people must participate in the process of ensuring who are the judges in the court. The people must participate in ensuring who are the people who will sit at Ayala. The people must participate when we are bringing new members into the community. And the more we ensure that there is more public participation, the less we will move this process from the summit, from the politics of the hegemonic political class, and lower to the people, and possibly push this community forward and not, backwards, as we are regressing. Again, this is why I remain cautiously optimistic, and I hope that all of us, in one way or the other, like Emily said, are going to work to ensure that this community works. And this is the very reason why we have Jumuiya. This is the very reason why we're having this forum. We ourselves are trying to do the small part to ensure that this we go more towards becoming a more perfect union, as some people will say. Thanks.
There's Asante Daktari, there's a participant who has had a burning question. Because we're just going to segue to closing statements. Of course, for the questions that have not been answered, the panelists will give their final remarks on that. But I see there's a Mr. Julius John. If you're with us and you hear us, you can.
It is from Tanzania.
I believe so. I could be wrong.
It's okay. Let's hear.
I'll give you just 2 minutes. Yeah. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good evening to you all. My name is June. I come from Tanzania. I'm a LLM student at Makumila University.
Awesome.
My contribution is on the issue of the structure of the East African community, which actually the principle of people-centeredness is one of the key principles that make the EAC to be moved on. Now, the issue that I want to contribute is on the issue of the institutions. Okay, I heard some previous speakers have spoken a lot on the issue of deportation and other issues like that. Now, one may ask himself or herself that how are we going to enforce the treaty? The partner states abide by these, by the EAC treaty. Now, I think for me, it may be a good time for us to come with the strong institutions that may compel the partner states to abide by the treaty. Now, at the European Union, they have the European Court on the people's, on human and people's rights, which actually the decisions of that institution supersede the decision of the national courts. Now, in East Africa, do we have such institution? So for me, I think we should come up with the institution, with a strong institution that may compel the partner states to abide by the treaty. So that is what I can contribute for now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Julius. And I hope we've not hit too hard on your Tanzanians during this conversation. But thank you so much for adding voice. The panelists, if you see the Q&A, we have a comment there from Advocate Eugene Otieno, I believe I saw that name correctly, Owade, who's asking for some idea of hope of a unified, coherent, and secure future for the EAC block. Thank you, Advocate Eugene, for that question. So as you give your final remarks, you can do so. And also any other issues that were addressed to you and you think you should come up with them. Jentrix, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you so much to everyone who has participated. Because of time, allow me to quickly address George Skem and also Mr. Owade. And let me just start by adopting a majority of what Dr. Wekesa said. For me, I think both with the eventual political integration that is envisioned in the treaty establishing the EAC, and for the hope of the future of the EAC generally, I think for me the hope lies in the people. We have all spoken about the importance of the people-centric vision that the EAC is founded upon, and we have seen that recent developments show us that indeed sometimes, and many times there are divisions between the political elite and the common wananchi, so to speak. And so for me, it lies upon the shoulders of the people to come together, band together, and see what we can do in our various places where we stand. And so we cannot afford to tire, we cannot afford to be apathetic, because this goes beyond just the theoretical conversations that might be had. This touches at the very essence of our lives, both as citizens, as professionals, as people, wherever it is we are. Making sure that this, as Mr. Julius said, making sure that we have institutions that work will be everything for us within the community and even within member states. I think I'd also like to just very, very quickly comment upon our culture. We know that corruption is a big problem in most, if not all, of the member states, and other such problems that hinder the fulfillment of some of the ideals that we speak about. And so, it's easy to point fingers and say we need better leaders, which of course we always do need better leaders and we need to build institutions. But for me, I think it will be impossible to achieve the things that we speak about if we do not change our culture, and culture begins at the individual level. I really loved what Dr. Wekesa said, just to quote him again, about integration not just being political, it's also cultural. How are you interacting with that Tanzanian friend of yours? How are you interacting with that Ugandan neighbor that you have? It really, let's bring it home. Let's make sure that these conversations don't just stop at the academic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jentrix. Chepkorir, your final remarks.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. It's been a wonderful webinar. Just to add on to what Jentrix has said, in regards to Owadi's question, Owadi is actually my friend. I think that, well, the EAC can come and die, but it will still resurrect because we have a history that tends to pull us together no matter what. So yeah, there may be many challenges right now that threaten or might threaten the sustainability of the community, but we just can't help but come back together. That's all I can say. And so we will be forced to figure out how to make the community work at some point. And just to add that, I think most EAC leaders are friends. I think they're just nationalistic friends. I'm not convinced that the spirit of integration is in them. I think they're still very they're friends, but they're still very nationalistic about how they engage with the whole idea of the EAC. And that's the problem. I see it as negative integration at this point, especially. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Wonderful evening.
Thank you. Our co-editor-in-chief, final remarks?
Ah,
I was going to, we have two in common. So there's one Harrison.
yeah.
And then can we do Harrison? And then
Okay.
these are the difficulties I face. Dr. Mbori.
Honestly, I don't have much to say. I already mentioned my closing remarks, which is to say we have this has been a wonderful session. Thank you to all the people who have attended. I hope we can extend this and publish this material. There's a lot we wanted to discuss. We haven't gotten to discuss this. I hope that all the people who have attended and will spread the word of the interest we have in this area and how this is important for our Jumuiya. I hope that this is going to push the discussion even further in order to create a better Jumuiya for all of us. we will have different programs. We will continue to engage as much as possible in this area. And I hope that this small intervention is going to make this community better and not worse, so that we can move forward. That's all. Asanteni sana.
Thank you so much. Then the other
co-editor chief is right here.
My co-moderator.
Yeah, it was great moderating and learning at the same time. It was great listening to all of you, both the panelists and also those from the audience who gave us their remarks, and also those who participated, even though maybe they didn't speak, so you didn't get to see them. But it was really nice moderating from this side and learning and doing all that. If I was to respond to just one issue that was raised, hope.
Yeah.
I think for me, my hope is usually in the fact that we can always do something. And you can do something depending on the talents you've been given. As academics, one of the things we can do is to raise awareness, to create platforms such as this, where we just talk with one another, update each other, share our thoughts, fears, and concerns. And then, as you noticed today, there were people from all over the region, which means we can actually talk, we can continue the conversation. And after this, as academics, I think we have to do the journal.
Of course.
And I think we'll be announcing it's coming out soon, the Jumuiya journal. And that's how to do it. And I'm so grateful that we are playing our part, and you've all been together with us as we do this. Thank you very much. Co-moderator, you're smiling.
I'm happy now to come back. I just have to thank everyone. So we've come to the end of our insightful webinar, reviewing the developments in the EAC with us, the Jumuiya Editorial Board. This was also sort of a meet and greet. We are just about a year old of working together, and this is truly a passion of each and every one of us. There are more members who are in the audience. Edmond Shikoli, we have Nyanje Wanyanje, we have Cyril Kubai. These are all the other members who have been helping us in the background. Thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you for sparing your time to attend this discussion. At some point, I think we saw about 102 participants, and we will share the video recording of this. We usually upload it on our YouTube page, so look out for that. I've had so many suggested topics for our Usuli blog. Please send your contributions to that. Look forward for our volume 2 sometime in July. We've been working on this for quite some time, but it's finally going to be on your doorsteps or screens pretty soon. And just to thank also the team who has helped us organize this webinar, Ukami, Stanley, and Anthony Momo, who have been behind the scenes live tweeting and ensuring that everyone is able to speak when they needed to. And it seems a part 2 is a must. It's quite necessary, and these are some of the interventions that we do. So I think I will just end this webinar with a word of prayer, and feel free to reach out to us on our socials and continue the conversation. So let us pray. We give you thanks, Almighty God, for this and all your benefits, who live and reign, world without end. Amen. Have a blessed evening, and thank you so much for joining us.